Okay, so you might just need to press OK or something like that on your screen, just if it's okay to record. So, hello everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a webinar learning from Mark's 136-mile ultramarathon attempt to run the Wye Valley walk faster than the current fastest known time. And I'm Christina, I'm a coach, and I help people to make a positive impact in the world whilst not sacrificing their well-being or burning out. And over to you, Mark, to introduce yourself.
And I'm Mark, call myself Big Adventures on Average Talent on Instagram and on YouTube. And I'm a teacher, also a running coach, and not to mention, of course, being Christina's husband, the most important of my roles. I do have a history of taking on big cycling and running challenges. So we're here to talk about the last one of those. And as I'm sure most of you already know, although I set out to run 136 miles, break the record for the fastest known time of the Wye Valley walk, I did not achieve this. I did achieve an awful lot, including running 100 miles for the first time in my life, which was a really big goal I had set beforehand. But the reason why this webinar's main theme, alongside resilience, is failure and how we deal with it is because I didn't achieve what I set out to do. So it's really great to have everybody here tonight to talk about how I failed. And thank you for the support going through essentially a public therapy session for me, which hopefully will leave me feeling good about it still. Then it's great to have Christina here because she can draw out the learning from what actually happened and make it applicable beyond the story of what happened to me into other people's adventures and just day-to-day life.
Yeah, and I don't know about all of you, but just like that word failure, failed, like it's not a word actually that either Mark or I really use that much normally, but we're going to be using it a lot today for the purpose of this conversation. But it kind of like it has like a physical response, like there's like a flinch in my stomach when I hear it, and I know that a lot of people have that kind of real physical response to it. And whether it's like a discomfort with the thought of your own failure, or whether you're feeling uncomfortable on Mark's behalf for his failure, it's a really uncomfortable feeling, and the fear of failure can stop us from doing the things that we want to do, and can stop us from doing things even that are really important or that really matter to us and to a bigger picture. And of course, for this, what we've been calling the Wye Adventure, the really important part of it is the work to protect and restore the River Wye, which is very polluted. And so we've been using Mark's ultramarathon attempt as a hook to raise funds and awareness for the Friends of the River Wye and for the citizen scientists. And so many of you will already know, and many of you were there, many of you were involved and were helping to support. We had a big community event for the River Wye, and it was a really great event. It was sponsored and supported by Chepstow Harriers, which is Mark's running club, and supported by Chepstow Town Council. Lots of volunteers as well supported. We had talks, stalls, activities about wildlife, running, adventure, and of course the River Wye. And there was lots of enthusiasm, lots of questions, a real buzz, and a real interest for people to do more and get more involved. And that's something we'll come back to later, and something that we definitely want to continue with. Like, that part's not over for us. And we raised, how much we raised so far, Mark?
So we are currently on £1,728, which is under 300, which is fantastic. Thank you to everyone who supports that. It's also under £300 less from my original target, which was 2025. So £2,025.
Is that another failure then, Mark?
Not yet. We haven't finished, but thank you for bringing that the F word up. No more F words, please. And yeah, this webinar is also part of the fundraising effort. So if you have already donated, thank you very much. But if you are willing or able to donate, then that is really appreciated. And also to note, if you missed the first webinar or you want to have a replay, that was recorded and you can get a link to that, as well as some blog posts further exploring that that Christina's done.
Yes, actually, yeah, I'll send a link for the previous recording and for this recording out afterwards for anyone that would like that. So yeah, I also just want to echo Mark's thanks. Thank you to so many people that have been involved in this so far. And for today, so Mark and I are going to talk for a chunk, and then we're going to hand it over to you guys like last time for questions, but also comments, takeaways, insights. And, we know that we've got a room full of people here who have experienced challenges, whether in, big adventures or ups and downs of everyday life. You're also going to have some learnings of your own that you can maybe offer and share with us about resilience, maybe about failure, and so we'll also invite you to bring your offerings to the room as well. So first, Mark, why don't you tell us the story, what happened out there on the trail?
Absolutely, thank you. Well, I was out on the trail for 31 hours, not to mention months of training for it, so I could talk for hours about this, but don't worry, I am going to keep this to around about 10 minutes. But if you've got any questions from it, then either pop them in the chat or save them. There's some time at the end as well. But let's crack on. So by the time any of these big challenges start, you basically, or at least I am, just kind of raring to get going because the kind of anticipation, the prep, and the stress and the build-up is worse than the actual thing itself. And by the time you have done all that prep, you just have to run for 33 hours. And that's kind of simple in a least a stress way. This one started with a 4:45 leaving the house for a 2.5 hour drive to Haffron Forest at the start, which really hammered home quite how ridiculously far away it is. And since I was running all the way back to my house, I had to run it all back. And it was quite intimidating, but I was feeling pretty positive. We spent the journey with Jen trying to decide what would be the best songs, because I wouldn't be listening to any music, partly to save battery and partly so that I could really focus on navigation, because getting lost was not part of the plan. And that was really quite good fun and feeling good. But when we lost signal on Spotify, getting near to the source of the River Wye up in Haffron Forest, it suddenly dawned on me that I hadn't actually downloaded the maps for the first 80 kilometers of the route that I'd never done before. And without downloading them and with no signal, the OS map app is useless. And that's quite a big mistake. So I did feel a bit foolish for a second. And then I remembered to find the funny side. And at least I had discovered what it was that I had forgotten, because I knew I'd forget something. At least I knew. And thankfully, as it turned out, the start of the route was really well signposted. But I didn't know that yet. So I had a bit of a panic. And it was just cold. That day, the 12th of October, the weather had changed over the last 48 hours or so, because it had been quite warm. It was the end of summer, but not cold. And it really did switch then and kind of caught me off guard. It was colder than I thought. My hands were really cold. I was a bit flustered by losing the map. I couldn't think of anything sensible to say. So the video that Jen took of me at the start talking will never see the light of day because I just waffled. I set off, and within about 400 meters, it's beautiful on the Haffron Valley walkway on the boards if you haven't been. But I was trying to get my GoPro out, and my hands were so cold. I dropped everything and had to stop and spend 10 minutes repacking my bag, just trying to get things accessible. And then the other issue had been at the start was that the public toilets there I planned on using were locked. So I'd gone less than 2K before I had to take a detour into the woods for a break. And that meant that after half an hour on the attempt, I had covered less than a junior park run, barely more than 1 mile, and got a little bit flustered. Thankfully, I then got into my groove. The sun came up. I warmed up. I got out of the woods and could see the beautiful valley. And there was a bird of prey flying along next to me, not in a kind of circling because I was about to die way, but more in a kind of with me as one with nature, which I really enjoyed. And somehow, miraculously, despite that amateurish start, I was on pace. I covered the 7 kilometers I needed to cover in the first hour, which was really reassuring that I could stop, deal with problems, whatever it was, and still manage to hit that 7K an hour on this terrain, which was really nice. And it was just beautiful. And I started feeling really positive. And then coming down from the first hill section to the road, I came upon a motorcycle off-road test centre. And I recognized it. And I realized I recognized it from watching The Long Way Round. It was in episode 1, for those of you who watched it, where Charlie Boorman and Ewan McGregor go and test ride off-road KTM bikes. Now, That does sound like a random fact, but that show from I don't know how long ago now, 20 odd years, was the catalyst for me really getting excited about doing long distance traveling. They went around the world by motorbike. I'm not that cool, so I went on bicycle and cycled around Scandinavia. And that kind of going on those challenges is and adventures is what's led to me doing things like this. So it kind of made me feel like I was exactly where I was meant to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. A really nice sign. And that positivity carried on for the next 12 hours, I think. No, 11 hours, where everything seemed to go right. I was eating well. I was running great. I was slightly ahead of pace. It was beautiful. The views were stunning. Um, I didn't have any major issues with cows, which was one of my major concerns going in because I just find them a bit uh, intimidating. And the support from Jane at that point was incredible. She kept popping up where I wasn't expecting her, and she pops up at exactly the moment I needed when I just realized that something was wrong with my sock. So she was there and had my kit. We could change socks. I changed into a clean pair of socks because what I'd done is I'd gone straight through the hole of my toe sock, but I'd spotted it straight away and I dealt with it before it became an issue. All going to plan for 11 hours on track, over 80 kilometers completed, really enjoying myself, feeling pretty good. And then the heavens opened and it went from this sunny, glorious day into an absolutely apocalyptical rain and wind. Got footage of it somewhere where it just barely see me from my own camera. And I got wet and cold, and it was already starting to become dark at that point. And I set off from then onto the longest, a really long, hilly, difficult stretch as it became dark. And that really was hard work. And I got to the end of that section feeling rough. Um, and it was kind of quite a sudden change, really. And I think that was at Glasbury where I was ending the time with Jane and Pam was coming in to support. And what was a really cool moment was some people had been non-runners, not people I knew, had been watching the tracker. They were friends of the Wye supporters, and they turned up with a banner to cheer and applaud as I arrived in. But I didn't really feel like I wanted applause or anything at that point. So I have a bit of regret there that I was friendly, but I maybe didn't give them as much of a show as they would have liked. Um, Thankfully, the public toilets at Glasbury were open, and I went in. I could get changed out of all the wet gear, put on fresh gear, leggings for the night, and go off. I was cold, and I kind of hobbled and walked off, thinking I'll warm up and I'll start running. But every time I tried to run, my hips just in agony, kind of clenched up and made it really painful, and I had to stop and walk again. And I realized that I was faster walking than kind of running for a bit, having to stop. Garen, so I just thought I'll just keep walking and I'll get through this. So I ended up walking all the way to Hay on Wye, which was a nice big stint of the way through, and was going to be the point where my nighttime support with Pam ended. And then from roughly midnight until 7 a.m., when Dickie was going to meet me, was going to be on my own, which was always part of the plan because I really wanted to experience the night. But I was behind schedule and I couldn't run, and I was definitely feeling worse for wear. So I decided to have a longer break, try and get some sleep. So I attempted to get 25 minutes sleep in Pam's van. I tried the coffee nap. So I had a coffee, went to sleep, and woke up 20 minutes later. The idea is the caffeine kicks in. I'm not sure I actually went to sleep, so I don't know how successful it was. I could tell Pam wasn't quite convinced I should go off. I was in a bit of a state, and that gave me a little bit of a worry. We're going to come back to this later because it was kind of the crux decision point. Um, but I was committed to going, and I wanted to go. Um, Pam clearly was very worried about me. So rather than going home and getting ready for work the next day, she decided to drive on further on the route, her and her partner, and sleep on the side of the road so that there was somebody around to get me. Um, it was kind of somewhere between reassuring and also made me panic that I must be in a really bad state. But it was much appreciated. And I asked them to make sure they weren't obviously on the route so that I didn't have to kind of walk past them and be tempted by the van and the easy way out. And off I went. I knew the next section though. This was the first bit of the route that I had. Recce all of that first 100 kilometers had been brand new to me. And it was really reassuring to be on ground I knew. And it was a beautiful section. The stars came out. which meant it was a beautiful night because I could sit and watch them, but it also did make it really cold. And the ground was really wet. I think that combination meant I never quite warmed up. I put on all my layers when I left Pam's van, and I never took them off again. Um, it was cold. But when I passed Pam's van about 3 hours later, they tried to park off the route, but I hadn't. Luckily, I was still feeling great, so I wasn't tempted to stop and carried on, feeling pretty good, and only 2 or 3 hours behind schedule at this point. Still just walking the whole way, but in my mind, I was like, well, I'm only losing a couple of kilometers every hour. Maybe in the morning when I warm up, I'll be able to catch up because I can do more than 7K an hour normally. Then a little bit later, it was getting to about 4 in the morning. I had to go through a large section that was orchards before we got to from between Broadine and Byford. There's loads of orchards there, and the ground was really wet. I mean, it'd been wet all day, but this was really wet. So rather than having soggy feet, I had damp, freezing cold water up to mid shins, mid calf, like regularly. And that, and plus being the coldest part of the night, really, really started to take its toll. And I was slowing drastically then. Byford, though, had this nice little bonus. My mate Joe had stashed some water and a back box or several boxes of snack bars and food for me in the church graveyard. So at 5 a.m., really cold, I arrived in Byford and went rummaging around in the graveyard to find the food and the water. And then I had to faff around pouring it all into my bottles. That was a really nice welcome break that I had been looking forward to for, well, hours at that point. But I got really cold, and when it came to moving from there, my legs did not work anymore. My hips had completely seized, and I could barely walk. I messaged Dickie, and he called me back, and we had a chat. And I think it was basically like, "Oh, I'm in a bad way." Uh, Dickie's a very reassuring person, and he's reassuring. I'll be there. I'm on my way. It'll be an hour and a half. So, okay, going to keep moving. So I kept moving, and I hate to think how long it took me to walk the next 100 meters. But then I turned a corner, and somehow that tight pain vanished, and I could just walk again comfortably, which was awesome and kind of validates the idea that things might get better if you keep going. But then I started. It was nearly sunrise, and exhaustion caught me. I started falling asleep while walking, which is a really surreal experience. And to add to that, then the Cheshire Cat came through a hedge, twirled around a little bit before curling up in a ball and becoming a puddle. I think that was when I finally twigged that I had a bit of a problem with exhaustion, and for some reason I hadn't realised before then. So I had a caffeine gel that was specifically there for that reason. I perked up and I felt great. That caffeine really hit the spot. The sun was coming up. I was closing in. I was only a mile or two away from having my longest ever run. Reaching the main road, van drove past, and it was Pam on her way to work. I felt great. I think if she'd seen me maybe 30 minutes earlier, I would have been in that van and out of there straight away. But by that point, I felt great. I was like, nope, I'm off. I want to get to my longest ever distance before Dickie comes to meet me, because then I've done it no matter what happens. Because I basically have kind of written it off as Dickie was just coming to pick me up to go home because of how we were when we spoke. And then we had a bit of a, well, fun in retrospect, maybe a moment where Dickie was trying to find me at different road crossings, but the track is not perfectly accurate. So he was messaging me, which I missed me at the road crossing. Because I think he was probably a bit worried about what state I was in. So he was messaging my wife, or messaging Christina. And we had this kind of triangle going around. But I decided to use the last of my phone's battery to record the sunrise from the top of a hill, which was absolutely stunning. But it did mean my phone battery died and I had no way of getting in touch with anybody. I mean, I had a charger, so I was messing with that, but thankfully, Dickie found me at the end of that road. And that cup of tea and that 25-minute sleep in the front of his car were phenomenal. I had already done my longest ever distance by a little bit, and I thought maybe that was enough and I'd go home. But after that nap, I was convinced that I was going to get to 100 miles. And as I said to Dickie, I'm going to get to 100 miles now so that I never have to do this again. It's done. Because if I want to do it, I want to get to 100 miles once in my life at least. I'm not sure if I want to do it again. So I basically grudged out that last stretch. Now, I also thought it was only just over a half marathon. It wouldn't take that long. Oh, how wrong I was. That was one of the longest mornings. That was from seven, half seven when I met Dickie. I didn't finish till 1 o'clock. And it just seemed to go forever. Um, Thanks massive to Dickie's patience throughout all of that, because he just gave me the space and the support to do what I needed to do. When we get near the end of one of the last stops, I was going to see Dickie, and I realized all my socks had bunched up because just must have been wet ground or something like that. He helped me take my shoes and socks off. And we realized it wasn't the socks that were bunched up. My feet had just become so loose skinned that the skin had flapped over and I was standing on the skin flaps. And then if this isn't ever a great sign that these things move things forward, Dickie helped me put my socks back on for me. I learned a new sock putting on technique as well. So thank you for that. But it's just going to show quite how I just couldn't have got through it without other people. Shortly after that, Tim managed to find me, met me, and we did the last 5 or 6 kilometers together. Tim babysat me. It's probably the slowest he's ever moved in his entire life, and he think he's got takes his young kids for walks. Sorry, it was slower. It felt forever. I remember when we finally did reach 100 miles in the middle of a field, I did have huge excitement and pride then. There was another half mile along this never-ending field to Tim's car. That was tough. I have no regrets of stopping at that point. It was 100% the right thing for me. Then there was no thought I'd carry on. It timed in nicely because we could drive straight from the end of the trail to the event in the drill hall, where everything carried on from there. So yeah, there we are in around 10, 15 minutes. That's what happened on the trail.
So yeah, what a story. I mean, obviously, I'm really relieved that you survived mentally and physically, and really proud of what you've achieved. And I'm also really appreciative of the support that you received along the way. And I think that's something that really pops out from the story, just all this support that you had. And there's also, support that in addition to that as well. And I think you have a particularly supportive running community, but also it seems that it's kind of like a typical running thing, like especially when it's these big events, like certainly from the documentaries that we've watched, like ultramarathon documentaries and things like that, that people get involved, people help and support each other. But outside of running too, having help can make such a difference. And it's something that comes up a lot in the resilience research. It's something that came up a lot in the conversations that I've had with changemakers and adventurers recently. I mean, one of the most recent conversations that I had with somebody who is telling me the story of how they've established their own community interest company and the impact that that's had, and alongside that, the journey of the company, their own personal transformational journey. And they have asked for and received a lot of help along the way, and that's been a huge part of what has enabled it. But of course, we don't always feel comfortable to tell people what our big goals are, to be able to ask for help, because we fear that we might fail our goals, and we fear rejection. And of course, failure and rejection are both possible, but it seems that perhaps the benefits might outweigh the risk. And the other thing that I just want to pick out from here as well is, given my interest in helping people to make their impact in a way that is sustainable for them on a personal level, and specifically at the moment, I'm currently certifying specifically as a burnout coach. So really, this is on my mind a lot. So I kind of feel like I should comment on the whole not heeding your body's warning signs, pushing yourself to the point of hallucinating. But then I think there are some specific parts to this which are useful to note. And firstly, this is a very specific event where it's an endurance event. So the whole purpose pretty much is to push your body to the limit and to explore your physical potential. And also, last time in the webinar we did before, when we talked about making our efforts sustainable, about building that resilience, building that endurance, your preparation for this has certainly been in line with that. Things like incorporating and prioritizing rest, recovery. And we talked about sometimes you actually need to slow down, stop, or even go backwards to be able to go further and even faster in the long run. Taking that time to build strength, whether it's that mental strength or that physical strength training, and prioritizing things like joy and all of these things that help to make what we do more sustainable with our goals, and also the recovery afterwards as well that you've built in. And also, of course, this is a one-off event. It's not a chronic situation. Um, and something else that I think is quite interesting is that in cases where people can get in trouble when they are ignoring or maybe have no idea what the signs are in their body, they're not aware of the needs, let alone how to meet the needs. And some people, maybe used to being sort of trained over a lifetime to bypass our needs, or that not to be selfish. But actually, for an event like this, it pays to be very attuned. I mean, and obviously in general life it does. But one of the things that I think, as an endurance runner and other endurance runners, actually you are very attuned to the signs from your body, and your needs, even if you are deciding to push past, as per the nature of this event, but it's intentionally done, in a fairly controlled environment, with that support, with that awareness, with that monitoring, and with being ready to pull the plug, if needed. What do you make of that, Mark?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I actually think you go further than that, and from doing challenges like this, where you are pushed to a limit or towards a limit, it helps improve your resilience and make you more resistant to potentially more resistant to burnout, I guess, because you're more in tune with your body and mind, because this is mostly a mental game as well as physical for something along these lines. So that experience, that trust in your body and mind, and also, this one has helped me grow and develop my support network, with people, and have this conversation with people. So I think it's made me stronger, emotionally, even if maybe not physically straight afterwards. Hopefully in the long run it will, from that experience.
And we've got you a support therapy group here out of it as well. And
Good, couldn't do without you guys.
so, one of the things that really struck me, I remember it struck me on the day, on that weekend, um, is that you knew from a certain point on Saturday night that you weren't going to be able to, you probably weren't going to be able to complete the whole route. Certainly weren't going to be able to complete it within the fastest known time. Certainly not smashing that fastest known time by like 14 hours, whatever it was that you'd wanted to, so that you get to the event. So you had lost that pull factor. You'd lost that motivation, drive to goal, to keep going. And that happened right at the point where you were facing a long, cold, dark, grueling night, already with wet feet, already cold, and already struggling to move. So how did you keep going all night long and go on to that 100 miles in spite of that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of, for me, the biggest takeaway from this one was that moment in Hay on Wye where I had to make the decision to carry on or not carry on. Because it definitely went through my mind there. When I stopped, I was, kind of almost 50-50 that I might not carry on. But I did not say that to Pam and her partner at all. I carried on as if everything was normal. I just carried on with my routine and did everything I had planned. I think this is one of the techniques that I use, which is try and become as automatic as possible while I'm doing this and just carry on the plan, unless there is a significant reason not to. And I was going slower, but I didn't have any major pains or aches. I felt fine. So there was no major reason not to. I was just slow and not running and cold. So I took some extra layers. So I think one thing was just that automation. But another thing was, for those people in the last webinar, we really talked about having the different goals. So to summarize, my A goal for this one was to smash the FKT and arrive at the event. The B goal was to still get the FKT. And then it went down from there. The C goal was 100 miles, because I've never run 100 miles before. D goal was my longest ever run. And my e-goal was to have some fantastic experiences while I was out there seeing the world around me. Um, and I think having those meant that it wasn't like, oh, I can't do this anymore, it's gone. Even though I didn't think I could reach the end, I knew I could still reach the other goals. So there wasn't like a, oh, what's the point? I already had articulated a point. And then, of course, there was the fact that I've made a bit of a big deal about this, a little bit of a song and dance. I posted it everywhere. I told everyone there was a tracker. There was an event with quite a lot of people going to the next day. So that made me kind of reflect on whether I should stop or not from that side as well. So I think those three things together um, led me to heading out from that. And I'm really glad I did because I had a fantastic experience, almost all of it.
I think also, hearing that you're having experience, being experienced at this, and that helped because otherwise, you're feeling bad, and you can have that moment where you're thinking, like, oh my God, like if I already feel like this, it's only going to get worse, and then you spiral. But your experience has taught you that you can come out the other side, you can feel better, you can even go on and have, an amazing event afterwards. And having been through that dark patch. And this is why we talk about ups and downs rather than just, down and down. Um, and the making it public, like this is a strategy of yours. This is something that you have talked about before, and that you have done before. And of course, as you say, in this case, we went a bit further with it than normal because we were really wanting to raise awareness and funds for the River Wye, and so we really did make a song and dance about it. But generally, you make it public, and this is something that provides that motivational boost and that sense of accountability, and that definitely sounds like it helped at that moment, at that decision point. Should I go on, or can I go on? But I think also knowing you, is it fair to say that your core motivation and reason for doing these big adventures is more of an internal one?
Yeah, absolutely. I do these kind of big things because I love doing them. And because over the years, as I've done them, I know what I feel, whether it's a fact or not, I don't know. But in my mind, it's directly led me to become a better runner. Um, but more than that, I think it's made me a better teacher, father, coach, everything. I think it's helped me grow as a person. I think they are essentially my biggest growth areas. Um, so as we discussed in the first webinar, I always try and make them public. It really helps me, I think, initially commit to it because there are so many different ideas. Once I've made it public, then I know what I'm going to commit to. But also there's an accountability side that goes with it when there's other people there. But I'm doing it because I personally just am irresistibly internally drawn to them. I can't imagine not taking them on. The hard part is really not taking on more of them, and trying to restrain that. So I know that the thought is, could having that external pressure lead me to carry on when I should not, and being overly concerned about people's opinions, and that's, I guess, the risk of it. But no, it's because I really want to do them and I really love them.
Yeah, I mean, and the research definitely is very supportive that internal drivers tend to be more effective in the long term for sustaining motivation and also just making it more enjoyable and satisfying. And so it's always worth trying to match your goal to something that you actually are internally motivated, that you can, you have this drive for, or finding something to connect to an internal drive to help you to be motivated. But also, um, you know, there's no rules, and actually, if there's points and certain there'll be times when that external motivation, that accountability, is helpful, then go with whatever works for you. But I also just want to pick a little bit more about this, thinking about what other people think bit, especially because sort of picking up on the conversation that we were having last time about when you're at that decision point, when you have to decide, should I go on or should I not? Would it be harmful to go on? And the things that can cloud your decision making, not yours specifically, Mark. One's can cloud one's decision making. Whether it makes you carry on longer than you should or stop too soon. And things like being overly concerned about other people's opinions can be something that can cloud your ability to make decisions in that time. And also it's at that time when you're stressed, you're feeling under pressure, you wouldn't even be making the decision if you weren't already feeling some kind of trouble. And that's when you're stressed, that's also when those kind of unconscious beliefs and narratives can sneak in. And, you know, things like, for example, believing that your worth and value is tied to the outcome, or that you need to prove something or disprove something. And this is where it can, in that moment, be difficult to get a clear picture about what to do. And I don't get the impression this was particularly going on for you, but I think we can learn a lot about ourselves in those moments as well, like learn what is influencing us. And so back to the multiple goals, the A to E goals that you told us about last time as well. And this is such a great strategy. And any time I mention it to people, people are like, wow, yeah, that's really good idea. And our children are doing their own versions of their A to E goals and things as well. Obviously, you don't normally need as many as A to E, but as this was such a big thing, it deserved a few extra letters. And, you know, of course, we don't always have control over the outcomes, or there can be a lot of influencing factors. And so giving ourselves this flexibility in our goals can be really helpful.
Absolutely. But I do think success and failure is just a bit of a narrow way of looking at it. It's not really success or failure. It's a spectrum or shades of grey. I don't like to think of the world as being too binary anyway. I think there's always like positives, negatives, truths and untruths. And you know, there's a lot of room within that. And I think success and failure, they're such strong words, but really is always going to be a spectrum of that. So within this, there were lots of successes and some failures, and that to me sits easily with my worldview, rather than being tied up on one particular thing. And I think one thing to mention is that one of the reasons I ever started running ultramarathons was after watching documentaries where people would look to do things that they would fail at and would get to that point. And so for the last 4 years, I've really been trying to find things where you might fail, where I might fail. So I was prepared for that as well, and it wasn't a complete shock to me. I think that did help, but having it as a spectrum is definitely a nice foundation.
And it gives you like a richer experience because there's more to it. You're not just reducing it down to that one moment, crossing the line at that time, or you know, the metaphorical equivalent in a different sort of goal that's not running related. There's much more to it. You're kind of acknowledging actually it's a bigger experience than that. There's more to it than that. And also when that A goal looks like it might be, you know, threatened, you've still got other goals up for grabs, and there's still a reason to keep going. And last time you told us about the overnight jungle ultramarathon race in Thailand, when it looked like the race had gone to pot, like your A goal was out the window, you had other reasons to keep going, and so you did. And actually, it ended up turning around. It ended up being a really good race. You came second, and you would have missed out on that if you had given up at the first sign that the A goal was out the window. And also something which I like, which about your ego in particular, of having that experience and immersing yourself in that experience, which you might not have been aware of at the time, but on some level, probably it was drawing your attention more to those experiences, like the bird of prey that was above you, and the starry night, you know, the sunrise that you sacrificed your phone battery for, and all of these things. And being more immersed in the experience, noticing these moments of joy, connection, these magical moments. And this just really helps to balance out, because there's going to be stressful times, and we're primed to pay more attention to the stressful times, to the problems. And it helps to balance out our attention and sort of recalibrate the nervous system. It affects the various activity in different parts of the brain. And actually, what it can do is mean that when at that point when there are problems, you might be in a better place to be able to cope with the problems and find solutions for them. And the other thing is that these sorts of moments of, awe or connection to the natural world produce a chemical change in our body and brain as well. And these affect the way that we feel. So, like, can feel more hopeful, which is also going to be useful at a time when some of the letters of your goals are dropping off, and can quieten down that inner critic, and that sort of self-focused part of the brain. And can also, these chemicals also affect the body as well, can have some really useful effects on the body, like countering some of the physiological effects of stress, lowering heart rate, lowering blood pressure, but also helping with faster muscle recovery. So that's another thing that is actually going to be really helpful in this situation. So it might feel like that ego is kind of like, oh, that's the consolation prize. That's that's the lowest letter. And it's a nice to have, but actually it could be a really valuable one that actually helps contribute to your chances of succeeding with the other goals as well.
It's really fascinating hearing you say that because I'm pretty sure that you helped me get that ego in there in the first place.
Did
But
I?
it does make it, yeah, I'm going to credit you that one. It does make me, because I'm not sure I would have articulated it otherwise, just kind of hope it happens. But I think if you don't make it happen, it doesn't happen. And I'm saying it beforehand wouldn't have worked. But what I actually did that, hearing what you've said, would have given me loads of benefits. I'm not sure I can claim this as an intentional one because it wasn't. But what I did was every hour on the hour, I did like a video log of where I was at, what I was up to, and how I was feeling. And the effect of that was it made me step out of my own head and approach it from kind of a third viewpoint, almost interview myself, which immediately made all of my difficulties seem less. And it meant I had to kind of focus on thinking about all the nice things I'd seen along the way. And I saw so many. So it brought that to my mind. And after each one of those, I felt better. And I kind of at the time thought it was just because I've done another hour, I'm on to the next one. It's one step down, but there's loads of other things there. So having that structured way of reflecting each hour was an absolute stroke of genius. Well done me.
And actually, again, like that really fits with what's in line with recommendations from psychology, about resilience and about processing what happens and our feelings about those things. That, acknowledging the whole picture, the ups and downs, and that stepping back, observing. And it's kind of like a video blog mindfulness thing, like a mindfulness vlog or something.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to move on now, kind of from those areas of resilience onto the topic of fear of failure and failure. Oh, more of that F word. Oh, okay, I'll get through this. So, a silver lining I can see from me not completing this, I'm not going to use the F word, was that we can really focus on benefits that came beyond the run, because um, by not completing it, then we can look more at the other things. There's some benefits there as well. And I can say the fear of failure didn't need to be there. The round of applause I got when I came into the drill hall was, I mean, wow, what an experience. And I saw the most amazing sunrise, a fantastic sunset, a rainbow, and some of the most beautiful places in Wales I've seen. And the friendships and social bonds that I built from that were fantastic. So if that was a failure, there was nothing to be afraid of. Um, I did think that because I went straight to the drill hall, I didn't have a chance to process anything else. Tim drove me straight there, and I walked into quite an incredible reception. I have not cried like that more than once or twice in my life. And going to speak with people straight away and hearing such a positive response meant I had no time to doubt what people might think about it. I think if I'd gone home um, and by myself and kind of sat there, I might have ruminated on it. But speaking to people about it really helped me come to terms with it quickly and really told me that there was nothing to be afraid of. And it's funny that the most fearful part of failure, at least in my mind when I'm talking about it, would have been what other people thought rather than even as much of what I would have thought. But yeah, that positive response from all the people here and everyone else. So thank you very much.
Yes, it's quite a nice example to be able to share that actually sometimes failure is not actually that bad and not actually something, it's not as bad as we think it might be. And which is quite good because, some psychologists say that actually failure is really necessary. The psychologist who's done a lot of work on stress and resilience with NASA says that failure is a requirement for resilience. Um, and I don't think it's necessarily that if you fail, then that equals resilience. I don't think it's like a direct route like that. And actually, there is research showing, at least in an academic context, that previous failure can be associated with less well coping with subsequent failure. So it's not an automatic thing that happens, but it seems to be, and there's a lot of research that's showing the importance of if you're learning from your failure, then that's the bit that creates the resilience. And also something else that there's so much really, really interesting research about is self-compassion and the importance of that. And self-compassion, when people have that self-compassion, that's associated with less fear of failure before the event. It also facilitates better learning from the failure and therefore, more resilience. So that's something that we can cultivate. And that same NASA psychologist also points out that even regardless of whether or not you fail or succeed, when you take these things on where there is a chance of failure, and you're kind of going out of your comfort zone, then this is already, you're creating chances for growing resilience because you're having different experiences, you're learning, you're expanding, consolidating your social network, and these are all things which you've talked about for yourself, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all those benefits were there from putting yourself in that position of risking failure. And it draws to mind actually a slightly different example. So I'm currently reading the book about Dina Castor, who's one of America's greatest ever distance runners. So quite vastly different to me. But her career stumbled and nearly ended when she got to college, which should have been when it kind of kicked off, because she'd won everything as a junior. I mean, literally undefeated for years. So when she started to lose, she didn't have that resilience that would have come from um, having lost in the past and having to overcome it. All she had was the fear of not winning anymore. So I think we all want to be successful all the time, but we're just not going to be. Um, and so we tend to limit the chances of failing by limiting the things we do, and that means we're not going to grow and reach our potential as much. I'm never going to be a world class athlete, but I want to become better than I am now, and I know from all the theory and from logic that I need to fail a lot to get there. And I'm quite comfortable in the idea of doing it, really, but it's still hard to put yourself out there for that and to go through it. So knowing it doesn't make it any easier to actually live it.
I have seen it. I'm just thinking of this Dina Castor example that you've given. I've seen quite a few times in the work that I do where there's been that maybe early on almost easy access to success, or where, in like a school environment where it's quite a simple, like linear relationship for some people where I work hard, I get results. And they might even have been explicitly taught that, like, if you work hard, you will get results. And then it might come to the point where they rely on that and becomes attached to their sense of self-worth, that they need to work hard and get results. But then once they're out in the big world and things are more complicated and there's more factors involved and it's not within their control, and especially, some of the people that I've worked with, doctors in hospital and people working on big complex global issues, there's no longer going to be that linear relationship. It's no longer as much in their control, with an influence but not control. So they might work hard, but then if they don't get the results, then they might think there's something wrong with me, and then either just then give up. There's something, I can't do it. There's something wrong with me, or they still cling to that rule that they had before, where okay, if it's I work hard and get the result, then I'm not getting the results, so I need to just work harder. I need to work harder. And then, of course, that can be a route to burnout.
So is it like I think it's Silicon Valley where all the startups where the entrepreneurs kind of try and start things quickly, fail quickly, move on to the next one, and learn and grow from that. Is that the best tactic?
I mean, I can definitely, I can relate to that. I've had personal experiences where that failing quickly so that you're no longer worried about the failure. You know, you've experienced it, you know it's okay, you can get through it, and then you're kind of freed up to then move forward. But that's not necessarily the case. And actually, there's an organization called the Failure Institute, some of you might have heard of. And the co-founder of the Failure Institute doesn't agree with fail fast, and she says fail mindfully. And part of this is a recognition that actually failure, you can be really casual about failure and be like, oh, it's all right, look how great it was for you, Mark. You had a lovely old failure. That's really nice. We could all do that. And
Thanks.
let's just all fail really quickly and then learn from it, move forward, and have a great experience. But actually, sometimes there can be some really big consequences. And this was the case for this co-founder. She had a social enterprise that she set up. It was meant to help women in poverty. It failed. So it wasn't just her own failure, but that sense of responsibility. And also, can be examples like, people set up businesses and they fail. There's the financial consequences, but it can also affect other people. So there can be actually some consequences, very real practical ones and also very real emotional ones. And so this idea that they talk about of fail mindfully is acknowledging that, and also being mindful about learning. And she says actually that you might have a responsibility to learn from your failure, and you might have a responsibility to share those learnings, but without the stigma and the shame. And one thing that they do, you might, again, like people might have heard of these events that they organize where they get entrepreneurs to stand up on stage and share their story of failure, kind of like what Mark has done with us tonight. And they find that this process, like actually, it doesn't have to be a shameful experience. And actually, a lot of people actively enjoy the experience. So is it enjoyable for you, Mark?
When we first said this was going to be the title, I wasn't convinced.
Was
But
that my
actually,
idea?
that one was your idea as well. Yeah.
Why don't we use your failure, Mark?
Yeah. Let's talk about the failure more. But actually, do you know what? It is really nice. I am enjoying it.
Good. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Um, yeah, and what they learn, what they see again and again, and hopefully what's going to happen for Mark here is that sharing your failures can actually make you stronger, not weaker, and it can help you to embrace the lessons. It can help you to then collaborate with people. For other people to learn the lessons, can make bonds stronger. And so all of this is really helpful for resilience and that bounce back ability. I mean, not that you always necessarily want to bounce back to where you were. Sometimes, we want to move forward from where we are, and that's all part of it. And also, there's other research about failure with entrepreneurs whose businesses had failed. Again, real financial consequences, but also real emotional, psychological consequences. Real feelings of grief, feelings of frustration, and physical responses related to the stress that they were going through, actually becoming ill. But what was interesting in this research was that even though these psychological and physical responses were, very clear, very impactful, when they were asking people what about the coping mechanisms that they put in place, they did use coping strategies around the business side of it and the financial and practical side of it, but they didn't do anything about the emotional side of it. And if they did, it would be like avoidance or denial. So it didn't help them to process it. And so these people had unprocessed grief, unprocessed strong emotions that were affecting them. And it's particularly noteworthy, when we're talking about learning from failure and resilience and, being able to then move forward. because unprocessed grief and frustration have been found to limit the capacity for learning. And so it's an important, and obviously that's an important part of the ability to gain resilience from experiencing failure, which obviously is not an inevitable part of failure to get that resilience. And the other thing that is relevant to what we're doing tonight and relevant to what they found at the Institute for Failure is that they found that because of the shame, people weren't talking to other people about what happened, and they were withdrawing from their social support and becoming quite isolated. And so, of course, again, this is going to affect their possibility for resilience, because part of what gives us our resilience is our social support.
I think that is, I mean, I just went for a run. I haven't had a business or failed like that. Literally, it was just a run. So you saying all that does kind of make me realize how small a thing it was in so many ways. But there's not always the magnitude of it that affects it. But I think one of the things that worked really well for me was a consequence of making it so public at the start about what I was hoping to do, and talking to people about it at the time and afterwards, is because I've never had to worry about what people think, because I know they've told me that most people have been really supportive. Anybody who disagrees, that's fine. I just know. And there's no like secret lurking gremlin I've got to worry about of what people think, or that people might ask how it went and I've got to tell them. It's all there and I don't have to worry about that. And I think that has really helped. And also having this session planned in advance, that we would come back and talk about how it went, meant that there was a structure in place for talking about it. And obviously talking it through with you, Christina, as well, that helps, because I'm lucky that we can talk these things through. So I was in a privileged and great position, and thank you for being here for me tonight, everyone.
I mean, obviously, we're not saying that everyone needs to make that song and dance about it that we've been saying that we've made, and you don't have to put on a webinar about your failure, but it can be really valuable to share your plans, because then people can actually help you, motivate you, learn from your experience, and help you learn from your experience, and help you process and move forward and build a resilience. And then one final thing I just want to come back to that I briefly mentioned before is about that self-compassion. So I think, as I said, it's associated with less fear of failure, and it helps with emotional regulation. It helps our ability to learn. It helps people with more self-compassion tend to have better coping strategies. And it is also, we mentioned intrinsic motivation, internal motivation before. Having more self-compassion is also associated with more of that intrinsic motivation. And also, it's interesting that you mentioned, I think you mentioned that you still have that belief in yourself. That's actually also something that is associated with having more self-compassion, is being able to continue to believe in yourself, regardless of the outcomes as well. So it's that sort of inner self-esteem. And also, if you're responding with self-compassion, then you're less likely to feel the need to deny or avoid, or kind of not or repress your feelings. And that means then you can accept and acknowledge your feelings, and that means you can actually process them and they can pass on, rather than them kind of sticking to you if you have these sort of heavy feelings about what happened. So let me just bring my screen down. I think that brings us to the end of our really talky bit. So Mark, having given you a stage to share your failure with us, have we helped you process any grief, or have any learnings? Feel like you're ready to bounce back and try again?
Yeah, I will still say, though, the word failure, I don't like it. But anyway, I can cope with that.
After the
Yes,
webinar, we can stop saying failure.
please. No, my core belief that I can achieve 136 miles in the record time has not changed. I really enjoyed the experience as well, and it was fantastic, as I've said, and I learned a lot. And I'm going to sum up with the specific things that I learned about the runs. We kind of talked a lot about mindset and things a bit more generic, but I wanted to bring back and end with 5 things that I learned from that run that I am going to use to go and get it next year. There we go, said it. Number one, I'm going to go in the summer because that night was long, dark, full of terrors, as they say in Game of Thrones. That was probably the main issue. I'm not going to have a community event at the finish line. That was an added stress and also a distractor from all my pacing that I did not need. Um, oh my gosh, the support crew were incredible. But I think having not planned to have support overnight might have been a bit me. Um, I don't know. That's probably wrong. So I think having support overnight and also support for what happens if I'm off schedule, because one thing that if I had carried on that event, I had no support booked in for after 1 p.m. or 3 p.m. when I was planning on finishing. Um, I deliberately wanted to do this by myself, having done a couple of group runs recently, but I think there's some power in doing it with people. So I know, Jonathan, you mentioned having an interest in this. If you're still up for that, let's start having some more conversations around it. But perhaps the most important one that I learned, don't do something like this when I've got to go to work on Monday morning. It was not pretty. Um, and it was on my mind for the whole weekend as well. So the answer to the question is yes, I am committed to finishing this route. Um, it was beautiful, and I would like to do that. I think I can, but also I'm committed to the River Wye, and going to that community event in Chepstow was incredible. Like I was really inspired by just how many different people were there from so many different organizations and groups, and that was fantastic. And felt really purposeful of bringing people together. And we know that people from that have become citizen scientists, and there's some conversations going between groups that didn't happen before. So what I am thinking, and it is an initial kind of dream, is a Wye community adventure relay. So I want to bring in some more groups. And I was thinking that we could have some cyclists taking a sample from the source or from near the source, and some kayakers from somewhere else. We could do something around samples and all of these different challenges going off on the same weekend, but involving the cyclists and the fishermen and the kayakers and the motorcyclists and all these different peoples that would just make it have a bigger impact. But central to that from my side would be going out and having another crack at getting that record now that I know some stuff. So yeah, watch the space for 2025.
So with that, that brings us to the end of our part, and now we would love to hand over to you guys. Any questions, any takeaways, and anything that you would like to share with us and with the room here today, including any shares of any failures that you'd like to take the stage. Go for it.
I'll go first then. Thanks very much, both of you. I thought it was a really, really interesting talk that you've both done, and I gained a lot from it. One of the questions I've got for you, Mark, was in terms of food that you had to, that you ate throughout the start of the challenge all the way to the end. Do you have any stomach issues, or anything like that, or did you struggle? Sometimes you may get going again, and then you might have a bit of stomach upset or anything like that, or did you find that all seemed to go as planned?
Almost all as planned, but I think the one thing that disappointed me personally was because I was really looking forward to that focaccia sandwich that you were bringing me when we met. I was going to look forward to that all night, and then I didn't eat it, did I? Even though you brought it, because it just made me, that was right at the end when I got it when we got to the car, and I think because I knew it was towards the end, then I couldn't stomach that. But apart from that, the food and nutrition went pretty well throughout, because the intensity level was quite low, just sustained for a really long time. And I don't think I was particularly run down from food. I've eaten well. I was on plan. Um, Looking back at everything that went wrong, I don't think food was that one. Focaccia sandwich was absolutely delicious the Monday morning at work, by the way. So thank you for that. I owe you one, big time. But no, I think it did. I did switch to mostly like liquid fuel overnight. That was really good. The only nutritional based thing that I would change was kind of caffeine use. I think I respond quite positively to caffeine. And that's when I was falling asleep walking, the caffeine gel really perked me up. But the only thing I'd change nutritionally going back would be I would have had a really strong coffee when I met Dickie in the morning. And instead, Dickie's a tea drinker. Damien Hill is a tea drinker. Damien Hill, blimey. So I was kind of channeling the tea drinking vibe, but it's just not, doesn't have the same effect on me. I think I would have gone for a really strong coffee because I think that might have had an impact, but I don't know how big an impact it would have had.
Thank you.
I see a question in the chat from Joff about debriefing with Jane. Because Jane currently holds the women's record and was my support for most of the Saturday. And I always learn a lot from her because she's just so calm and wastes so little energy. I've watched her running an ultra before, and just that calmness is incredible. But her takeaway when we had a little chat was that, and I think there's some quite a big aspect onto it, which was kind of around the why was I going to try and break the record by 14 hours? That maybe I was a bit aggressive with my pacing and I could have just had a bigger sleep and carried on. And I think that is why, if I was going to do it again, I wouldn't have a community event at the end, because I was definitely basing the pacing off something that would work towards that. I do believe I could finish that on a good day, but it put a bit of pressure on that I didn't need. And maybe I like to think that I'm not impacted by what other people think, but that's just clearly never going to be 100% true. So that was one of my 5 points that I would improve anyway. Yeah. Any others?
Was there anything else that she did differently to what you did at the time?
Yeah, well, it was quite a different attempt because I basically tried to do it in one go without any rests, and ended up having two 20-minute naps, whereas Jane planned nights in B&Bs on the way. So it was, or maybe a van, I can't remember, but she slept for the night and had a proper sleep. And afterwards, I was sort of thinking I could have just got to Hay on Wye, slept for 6 hours, and carried on, and I'd have still been able to break the record by like 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. But I just didn't think I needed to. I thought I could do 33 hours in one go. I still kind of think I could. I think the problem was potentially the cold and, more I'm talking about it tonight, caffeine maybe. But yeah, I could have done it the way that I could have done it with a bigger sleep and would have broken the record.
When Jane did it, I think she didn't know anything about the FKT when she first started it. I think she basically just wanted to do it as I tell you what, I'm going to go for a nice little run walk along the Wye, taking her time in it. And it's only afterwards, I think, that she realised that she was the only lady who'd done it. So I think she took it that way. So I think anything is possible if you take your time. You can run a marathon with no training at all if you're doing sort of an hour a day with big rests in between. So it's simply then a matter of the time frame. Taking it slower, taking the pace off, would have been an easy win, but that's not what you planned. So I'm sure that's a factor.
Yeah, I think if I'd gone and broken the record, I would have finished at about 5 o'clock in the morning on the Monday morning, which really would have made work on Monday a bit rough. So it was never really an option. Yeah, I think you might be right there on Jane. I wonder how she's. There's a lady called Chelsea who is going to try and break Jane's record this weekend on the Wye Valley Walk. So I wonder how she will react. I wonder how they'll get on. It's going to be cold, so we will see. I'll be watching with interest. Does anything chime with what we've said around failure for anybody else in a different setting? Loading it up because there's a couple of people with some great failure stories here, but I'm not going to do that without permission because that would be mean. I'm not mean. Sorry, Jonathan, your hand was up again.
I was going to say, well, on that basis, I think the biggest failure is not to even try.
Yeah, I think that was something we talked about in the first one, wasn't it? Yeah, like and the experience of doing something and yeah, having a go. Whatever happens is going to be an experience, and it doesn't really matter what happens. It's literally just a run in this case, but in most cases, it's not quite as serious as we tend to think when we're trying to set ourselves to something. It always seems a bit more be all and end all.
I think you're having multiple targets, an A, B, C, D, E, or wherever you're going with it, really does help. But I'd also say from my own, when I didn't get what I wanted out of a particular race, I tried a marathon and I got injured in the build up to it, and that taught me you should never attempt something if your body has had problems in the lead up to it that puts you in a position where you're compromised. If you've compromised your training to an extent where you can't achieve what you set out to achieve, don't do it. Put it off, reset, go again when you're fit. Sometimes life throws you curveballs that you must listen to.
Yeah, I think it's that thing of listening, of thinking about what factors it is that's influencing you to do something. Are you doing it because you want to, because you can, because you've committed to it and you don't want to back out of it? I mean, I would challenge never doing it, even if you've not had the ideal build up. There might be changing your goals to something that's different or more realistic. I think runners, well, actually, no, I'm going to take that back. Not runners. I think we people have a tendency to affix our goals to like the outcome. I know, I've already started doing that for running a marathon next year. I'm thinking about the finishing time, but when I stop, I really want to think about how I'm going to feel crossing Tower Bridge or how I'm going to feel at mile 20. And actually, those might be more useful goals, or how my training is going to go even more than that, rather than the actual race itself. If I can have a training goal, the race will probably take care of itself. Maybe.
Yeah, that's interesting. Having a training goal rather than the race goal is something I've not considered. Yeah, that's important. Thank you for that.
Hi, Jonathan.
Yeah, just going to chime in again on that. I think it's one of my favourite phrases is journey, not destination. You know what the destination is at the end of a marathon, or you know what your goal time is, but it's the journey, and that's not only the journey of actually doing the run or running all the way down the Wye and taking the enjoyment out of that, but the enjoyment of the training on the run up to it. So, as runners as we maybe all are, you've got to enjoy every single training run. You've got to enjoy as much of every single moment out there, not just the actual finishing line itself. If you do that in life, you know where the final destination is. You've got to enjoy the whole lot as you go along.
Oh, you enjoy every single training run. I can't imagine that. I like that positivity. But no, you're right. I think then it's like enjoying all the different aspects for it for what they are, because trying to plan the logistics of when and where I would meet people, like looking at spreadsheets of mileage and elevation and trying to work out timings and map out what I was going to eat. Got to try and enjoy that part as well, and it can be quite good fun. It can be a drain, so it's trying to find all of the different enjoyment. And I know that I've learned a bit about doing that every time I've done something along these lines. So yeah, it's quite an interesting idea to have a goal for how you train and then just see what happens in the race. I quite like that idea. It's a bit more controllable, isn't it? Because races are so difficult to predict what's going to happen in terms of wind or rain. But if we enjoy the process, then I think I will aspire to be your level of enjoyment of each run, Jonathan. There we go. That's my new inspiration.
There will be a day when you can't get out there in whatever the weather is, and all you'll be wanting to do is just thinking, I wish I could go for a run today, and you won't be able to. So when you can, you just take every bit of enjoyment you can out of it. Doesn't matter what the weather's like.
Yeah, I think I'm almost never regretted going for a run. That's the same for the Wye Valley Walk. There we go. I didn't regret that one either. Well, apart from between about 6 a.m. and 12 p.m. Not quite sure my thought process there, but afterwards I did. Well, it feels like we have kind of come to a nice end there. So thank you for questions and thoughts. Obviously, if there are any that come up afterwards, I'm not invoking an embargo on talking about the word failure ever. I will if I have to. But also, love hearing about other people's thoughts and what got on. So thank you very much for all the involvement and support with the campaign. It's been brilliant fun, and it's been really personally enriching and rewarding for me, and really proud and pleased of the effect it's had on the event and the campaign and the money raised. I hope it's been of interest to people as well. So thank you very much for spending a Wednesday evening with us, and thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you both. Let's set a date.
Yeah, let's have a chat. Let's make it happen.
Take care, guys. Well
Take
done.
care. Thank you. Bye bye.